Around 20 years ago, the 600cc sports bike class started a sales decline as riders abandoned that part of the market. Ultra-competitive, production-based supersports racing forced manufacturers to make their road bikes ever more extreme, and while the resulting machines were impressive, they were increasingly expensive and lost the all-rounder appeal of their predecessors. Simultaneously, a new generation of higher performance, more usable adventure bikes appeared on the scene, attracting huge swaths of riders who wanted a single bike for both leisure and commuting. Exactly the market that the older, more practical generation of 600s had previously cornered. Fast forward to 2024, and there's something of a revival for sports bikes thanks to a new generation of softer, more affordable, road-biased machines. If Triumph had simply slapped a fairing onto the Trident 660, which makes 80 horsepower, it would already have had a pretty convincing contender in the upstart affordable sports bike class. But the company has instead opted to make some substantial changes to the 660cc triple to add a more distinct feel and increased performance. The capacity stays the same, as does the 74.04mm bore and 51.1mm stroke, but Triumph has swapped the Trident's single throttle body and manifold for a sportier triple throttle setup on the Daytona, adding larger exhaust valves, a new 3-to-1 header pipe, a redesigned cylinder head, a new crankshaft, and new cam profiles into the mix to create a sportier take on the 3-cylinder engine. Power rises to 95 PS and peaks at 11,250 revolution per minute or 1,000 revolution per minute higher than the Trident, while the redline moves up to 12,650 revolution per minute. That doesn't mean any loss at the bottom end of the rev range, though, as both the power and torque curves mirror those of the Trident at low speed, simply reaching higher outright peaks and revs later on. While the tubular steel perimeter frame is based on the one used in the Trident, and the suspension spec is similar, the chassis geometry is specific to the Daytona 660 and intended to make for a sportier ride. The rake is steeper, moving from the Trident 24.6 degrees to 23.8 degrees, while the trail is reduced from 107.3mm to 82.3mm. Despite those changes, increased offset means the Daytona's wheelbase is a fraction longer than the Trident's, rising from 1401mm to 1425.6mm. The forks are Showa separate function, big piston upside-downers with 110mm of travel. They're not adjustable but have been tuned to suit the Daytona's sportier intentions. At the back, there's a Showa monoshock with preload adjustment and 130mm of travel. The brakes are an upgrade compared to the Trident, with the same 310mm discs but new radial mount, 4-pot, Triumph-branded calipers instead of the 2-piston Nissans of the naked bike. A smaller 220mm disc and single-piston sliding caliper replaces the Trident's 255mm, one at the back. ABS is standard, of course, but there's no clever cornering anti-lock or inertial measurement system. The wheels are the same 17-inch 5-spoke alloys used on the Trident, but fitted as standard with Michelin Power 6 rubber, 120/70ths at the front and 180/55ths at the rear. Comfort, or the lack of it, was at the root of the downfall of the 600cc supersports class when the battle for on-track supremacy broke out in the early 2000s, and Triumph has recognized that. So we can expect the Daytona 660 to be much roomier and less punishing on the back and wrists than those machines were. In comparison to the Trident, the Daytona's new 2-piece seat sits just 5mm higher at 810mm. And like the Roadster, there's a focus on keeping it slim, to make the reach to the ground as easy as possible. The bars are lower and narrower than the Trident's, but Triumph has taken inspiration from 90s 600s like the all-conquering Honda CBR 600F of that era, and kept the riding position sensible rather than going for an extreme, track-biased approach. The bars are 95mm further forwards than the Trident's, and shifted down 110mm, as well as being 59mm narrower. They're also swept back another 6 degrees and rotated downwards by 13 degrees compared to the Trident's. There are similar changes to the pegs, move back by 15 millimeters compared to the Trident and up by 10 millimeters, while the seat is given a sportier style thanks to a separate pillion section, even though the tail bodywork like the fuel tank is carried over from the Trident. As a relatively low-cost bike, the list of standard equipment isn't a long one, but there's everything you need. The instruments are a neat setup, a variation on the Tridents with the same internal parts, but a new, trapezoid housing instead of the Roadster's circular design. The upper section is filled with a white-on-black LCD display for the revs and speed, as well as essential info including fuel level and gear position. Below that, there's a tiny 5-inch TFT color display that can be used for a variety of functions including phone-connected, turn-by-turn navigation via the optional My Triumph connectivity system. Elsewhere, all the lighting is by LED, including the headlights, and there's the option to upgrade the indicators to a scrolling style instead of the standard flash. As standard, there's an emergency stop warning system that flashes the hazards when you get hard on the brakes to warn drivers behind. On top of that, Triumph promises a range of more than 30 optional accessories, including a quick shifter, crash bungs, a pillion seat cowl and luggage, and since the engine comes in at precisely 70 kilowatts in European measurements, it's legal to restrict it to 35 kilowatts for A2 license holders.